Well, thanks for joining us on Super Bowl Sunday. I don't know if you knew this or not, but today is kind of a big day around here. Kind of a big game going on later today, kind of really important for a lot of us. I see a lot of great jerseys here. Now, just so you know, these boys are going to be playing today and kicking some tails, right? So we're going to root these guys on, right? Come on. Now, I just want them to know that in case they need me, I will be available. I don't think I'll make it a second in the NFL. But if you don't know the details, today, 5:30, you need to be watching on Fox, Super Bowl 54. And we will have prayer and fasting from 2 to 5 here at the church. Or I might be kidding about that. I don't know. But maybe not. But I'm sure we're all offering up some prayers today, aren't we? God may not be a Chiefs fan, but today we hope he is, right? I love, let's root these guys on. I just want to do this. I'm a former football player, played 8 years. I know I don't look it, believe me, but I did. I love the team dynamic. And so let's get it in here. And on 3, let's go Chiefs. Are we good for that? Ready? 1, 2, 3, let's go Chiefs. I can't yell because I got a microphone. It'll blow your eardrums. But you did a really, really good job there. But I'm glad you joined us today also for another reason, because we're starting a brand new series called Living the Dream. And this series is built around that question the video kind of talked about. It's a question that's so profound and relevant for the culture that we live in. It's a question that regardless of whether you're a church person or not, you've been asking before, you've thought this before. It's a question that for most of us, it kind of sits on the surface of our hearts and our minds. And it's a question that I think if you're a college student or a high school student, you should be asking this question. And it's basically, let me ask it this way: is it possible for two people who are in love to stay happy together forever? Is it possible to live the dream and to have a love that continues to grow and to stay in love? Because, right, it's easy to fall in love. How many of you agree it's harder to stay in love? Is it possible for two people who fall in love to stay in love and to stay happy together for the rest of their lives? Is it possible for us to live the dream? And maybe you grew up in a house where your parents divorced. Maybe they got remarried, maybe they didn't. But now, as a result of what you experienced, you wonder if it's possible for two people who love one another to stay happy together forever. Because for you, as you look around, you saw how it didn't work for them. And so you wonder, will it work for me? Or maybe, like me, your parents didn't divorce, but they didn't seem all that happy all the time, right? I mean, sure, they stayed together, but did they seem to really like each other very much? And so now, as you consider your relationships and your future, you're left wondering, is it even possible for two people in love to stay happy together forever? And maybe you feel like you're shooting for something that doesn't even exist. I think that for all of us, at some juncture in our lives, we ask that question. And it's a fascinating question, because in spite of what we've experienced in our past, and even what we're experiencing right now in our present, we wonder if our future relationships, is that even possible? In spite of our current marriage, or in spite of your previous marriage, or in spite of what you saw happen in your parents' marriage, in spite of the divorce rate that we're all aware of, all of that could lead us to say maybe it's not possible. But here's what's interesting. What I know about you, what I know about me, in spite of all of that, in spite of what's happened to us, in spite of what we saw happen in our parents' relationships, there's something inside of you and there's something inside of me that would still say it's possible. And not only do we think it's possible, but we think it's possible for us. You think it's possible in spite of how bad things have been for you or for your parents or in our culture. You still hold out a glimmer of hope that maybe someday in my current relationship or in my future relationship, I'm going to meet somebody and we're going to fall in love and we're going to stay in love and we're going to die in love together. And on our last date, we'll be in walkers heading down to where they eat lunch at the nursing home. But by golly, baby, we're going out together. And people are going to look at us and they're going to think, wow, look at them all these years and they're still in love. We think that in spite of what culture says and in spite of what we've seen and experienced. And do you know why you think that? Why you think that or why I think that? I don't have a verse for this. This is really my opinion. But I think that's a little bit of the image of God in you. I think that's a little bit of the image of God in me. That there's something in all of us that wants to find that one someone special where we have this deep intimacy and connection and communication where we know them and they know us. And as we get old, and even as our bodies change and the world changes around us, no matter if we stay as good looking as we are right now or have as much money as we hope to have, or if we are as healthy as we want to be, whether we're richer or poorer or in sickness and in health, there's this thing in all of us that we want to have a love that lasts with someone who's special to us. I think that's the image of God. So your answer to the question that I asked, is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible, but even though I think it's possible, I don't think it's probable. I think it's possible, and I even think it's possible for me, but will it happen? I don't know. I hope so. I'm not sure. So before we move on, we need to spend about 10 seconds talking about falling in love, because that's about all it takes, 10 seconds, because the only thing you need, the only requirement to fall in love is a pulse, right? I mean, some of y'all fell in love with somebody on TV. You ain't never met them, but man, you love him or you love her, and you never met them. So it doesn't take much to fall in love. All you need is a pulse. Did you know that according to Google, there are over 8,000 dating sites and apps to help connect you with somebody? If you pay them your money, they will connect you with someone they think. 8,000 agencies to connect you with someone they think you're a good match for. It's never been easier to fall in love, but I would argue, and maybe you would agree, that it's never been more difficult to stay in love. Many of us weren't equipped for that, but that's what we want. We want to find the one, finish life with that person. We don't want to just be in a relationship. We don't want to just survive the years. We want to be and stay in love. But there's some reasons why this is difficult, and this isn't new information for any of you. You know this already, but I'm up here, so I'm talking, so there you go. But part of what makes this difficult is that we haven't seen this modeled, this kind of a relationship. Well, because what we saw growing up, it didn't give us what we need to have healthy, long-term relationships that keep us, our love growing and staying in love. The truth is, most people have never been around a healthy, romantic, long-term marriage before. Most people have just never seen one. We've never tracked with it over a long period of time. So because few of us have ever really seen it, consequently, we don't know how to have one ourselves. It wasn't modeled for us. We grew up and we adopted the bad patterns and we replicated the bad examples of the people that we had in our lives, which makes it almost impossible for us to stay in love. I mean, many of you probably grew up in a home where this was kind of the mantra, whether they ever said it or not. Grew up in a witnessing, do unto others as they deserve to be done unto. Do unto others as they have done unto me, maybe, or do unto others as your mood would have it. Do unto others until to get them to see things your way. Do unto others until you wear them down long enough to get your way. Do unto others until you're just done and ready to leave. I mean, as you think about the relationships around you in your life as you grew up, whether it was with your parents or your grandparents, or you look at other relationships around you, what we see is while people might stay together, from what we can see and observe, we have to assume that they're not necessarily in love, because from what we can see, they don't even seem to like each other that much. So growing up, what most of us have seen, what most of us have had modeled for us, has left us ill-equipped to have a kind of healthy, emotional, long-term kind of love. And yet all of us think that one's possible for us, and we hope that we're candidates for it. But we don't ever had anybody model this for us. And the other thing that makes this difficult, really challenging, is what we have felt growing up. A bunch of smart people got together and they came up with a list of what it takes for a child to grow up in a nurturing and healthy environment so that we can be equipped to leave home, to leave the nest, and to go on to have a lifelong experience of healthy emotional relationships in the future. In other words, here's what it takes to be emotionally equipped to have a long-term healthy relationship. Here's all it takes. You need to grow up in a home where you have massive doses of respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection. Sounds like the family you grew up in too, right? I mean, Now, if all it takes, if that's what it takes growing up over a long period of time to have massive doses of these things to equip us and engage us in a long-term healthy relationship, then what are the odds that we'll be equipped to lead and manage a healthy long-term relationship if we didn't get all of these things? Not so good, right? And so then when you consider the fact that we're also meeting somebody, connecting with somebody, falling in love with somebody who didn't get much of these things either in their life, then our chances together of having a long-term, healthy, staying in love, kind of living the dream relationship gets even harder. So consequently, what happens for most of us is that for most of us, we come into adulthood, we leave the house, and we begin to look for someone in a relationship that we can get respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection. And I fall in love with you, and you fall in love with me, but now that we're in love with each other, I'm wondering if you're going to give me respect, encouragement, comfort, la, 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 la. Or are you just cute? Or do you just have a good job? I mean, when we're in love, what began as this hug around the neck, becomes a stranglehold for them to give me respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection. I got to have it. I got to have it because I came into this relationship with a deficit. We all did. We've all been malnourished in our life in these areas. Because nobody's perfect. Your parents, as good as they are, they're not perfect. And you, as good as you might be, you're not going to be perfect. But what we'll end up doing is we'll end up trying to squeeze out of the other person these things. And now all of a sudden after we're married, the thing that created this emotional energy that caused us to fall in love with one another in the first place, it starts to go away. And part of what makes it so hard is that we just haven't felt the things that we need to feel. And here's a really disturbing statistic, and it's been true for years, but 40% of the children who are born into this country every year are born into homes where there's no consistent father influence. So for 40%, there are no stable male role models in their lives. And I know that there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not trying to make a point. Some of that's beyond our control. There's abusive situations. There's a lot that goes into that. So I'm certainly not trying to make a point by saying that. All I'm saying that is if it takes all of that to equip someone to be able to sustain a lifelong, healthy, emotional relationship, and 40% will never have a meaningful relationship with their own father, then I'm just telling you, would you agree? They're going to struggle. They're going to struggle with this. There's a deficit, and that's not their fault any more than it's your fault, but it's the reality. And so here's the reality. While many of us are equipped to fall in love because we've got a pulse, in terms of what's been modeled for us and how we felt, we're not equipped to stay in love. We're not equipped. We don't know how to do it. We've never seen it. We've never felt what it takes to do that. And another reason why this becomes really, really difficult, especially in our day and age and our culture, is because our culture has a really low threshold for pain relationally, which means it doesn't have to hurt much or hurt too bad before we decide we're done and we decide we're getting out. I mean, gone are the days, right, when we said, I do, and I do means I do because we're going to do it whether we like it or not because we said I do, and when I say I do, I'm going to do it because that's what I do. Those days are gone. That culture is no more. In our culture today, the message that you and I get every single day is if you're not happy in your current relationship, it's because you're with the wrong person. You chose poorly. You need to re-choose. You need to get back out there and start all over again. And the thought that a lot of people have is that if you just keep looking over time long enough, you're going to eventually find that right person, the soulmate. Just shift relationships. Eventually you'll figure that out. But if you talk to people who've been married for 10 years or 20 years, and you ask them about that approach, then they're going to tell you that over the course of that 10 years or 20 years, there were days where I wondered if I had the right person. But I decided that the person I chose was going to be the right person. And so I'm so glad we worked through those difficulties. Betsy and I have been married 12 years. And there have been days where I'm sure she would say, I don't know if I chose right. But I'm so glad that we've consistently worked through those things because, see, here's the reality. Choosing the right person, sure, that's part of it. That's part of it. But learning to become the right person, that's the other part. And that's the part that we're not really equipped in our culture to do, is it? That's the part that we get no help from when it comes to culture, the people, or the world around us. And now, if we stop there, odds are that you're going to want to finish your life in love with somebody. You're going to want to stay in love forever. You may want your current relationship to be about love more than about just surviving life. You may want it to be that way, but I'm telling you, the odds are against you. And the odds are against me. And it might be possible, but it's not probable. Aren't you glad you came to church today? I mean, what if we just ended there and I sent you home encouraged, right? And what a buzzkill. But check this out. Don't miss this. Because into that chaos, relationally, that you and I can all relate to, because we all have our own stories. We've all been dinged up. We've all had people hurt us. Where we all saw relationships go sideways. Maybe it was our own. Maybe it was our parents. Maybe right now you're watching your kids go through something that is just breaking your heart. Into the chaos of relationships, Jesus speaks. 2,000 years ago, when he's with his followers, his disciples, he gives us the foundation for enduring relationships. And it's the foundation not just for male-female, marriage relationships. It's the foundation for every relationship in your life. Parents with your kids, you with people you work with, your neighbors, the people who make you mad. This principle of relationships is so profound and so powerful. It's so simple, it's easy to miss its power. It's easy to see beyond it and say, well, that's great, but where's the meat? Where's the teeth in that? The sort of romantic love that we all want to have with our spouses, where you can't wait to get home after work, and when the garage door opens and you hear it, you don't look for something else to do somewhere else, but you're excited that they're home. You're excited to be home. It's so simple. It's so counterintuitive, but it's not the way that we normally think, and it requires a paradigm shift for us and readjusting north on our relational compasses. And though it's simple, bless you, by the way, though it's simple, you can miss what I'm about to say, but it has the power. If two people are willing to embrace it and accept it and live their life following, pursuing it, what Jesus is about to say can change your life. And listen, even if you're here, you're watching online, and you're not a church person, you don't believe like I believe about Jesus, listen, what I'm about to say is still going to help your life. You don't have to believe in Jesus to do what I'm about to say. And if you start doing this, then I want to encourage you, watch how this will help your life get better and help you get better at life. It will help your relationships become healthier and become what you always hoped that they would become. And it was recorded by one of Jesus' closest followers, a man by the name of John, who was in the room the day Jesus shared this simple, powerful truth. And we're going to look at one simple verse. And when he got his disciples together, Jesus said this. He said, "A new command I'm giving you." Jesus was talking to these guys who had grown up with the 10 Commandments. He's like, I know you guys have got 10 Commandments, and in the Old Testament there's like 630-something other laws that support the big 10, but I'm going to give you a brand new one. And when I tell you what it is, you're going to realize it's not even that new. It's been around a while. It's really more remarkable and like, oh, how did I miss that kind of remarkable? It's so simple, but it's powerful, and it'll change things. So he tells them this new command. I give you love one another. Wait, is that it? Like, Jason, you should have studied harder this week. Were you celebrating the Chiefs a little too much this week? Like, you should have studied a little harder. Is that all you got for me today? Listen, I got her here. She's finally at church. She's finally listening. And he's finally here, Jason. You've got a captive audience. This is what you love one another. It'll slip right by you if you're not careful. Jesus takes a word that we normally use as a noun, and he makes it a verb. It's an imperative. It's a command. You do something as a result of this. Jesus' point is very simple. I want you to go and love one another, because I know you think love is like a place and a thing, a place like you fall into and out of, you arrive at and you leave, like it's a destination on the map. It's not. You think of love as a noun, but I'm making it a verb. I want you to go and love one another. Love requires you to do something if you truly love the person, which means that Jesus would have been not a very good marriage counselor. The couple would have come in and they would have sat down and they would have said, he does this and she does that and he does that and she does this. And Jesus would just look at the couple in their eyes and say, well, are you loving each other? Well, I used to. No. You used to noun. You don't used to verb. Are you loving her? Here, I'm gonna fix your relationship. I want you to go home. I want you to love each other. But we don't love each other. Well, you ought to. You're married. But we don't. That's why we're here. You're the counselor. What are yours? No, you're confusing noun and verb. What you're saying is you're not feeling it. But I want to help you feel it again. And in order to feel it, you got to do it to feel it. So your relationship started off feeling it. And then the feeling went away, and you're trying to get that feeling back. And the way that you think you're going to get that feeling back, because the last time you remember feeling that feeling was when you met someone new. So because, since the last time that feeling of love was there so many years ago when I met someone new, I'm going to find someone new. You think you need to go find a new person to feel that feeling again, but you don't. Let me help you. Here's how this thing works. If you want love to grow, if you want to maintain love, if you want to foster it and have that flame fanned into the flame even larger, quit treating love like it's a noun, like it's a place you arrive at or leave. Start treating it as a verb, as a lifestyle, as things that you do, because love requires action. Love requires something from you. So, go home. And I want you to love one another. So here's the bottom line, in the beginning, the foundation of our 4-week conversation, Living the Dream. Because Jesus gives us the foundation for staying in love. To stay in love, you've got to make love. Pause. A verb. You remember it now, though, won't you? You'll remember it now. I love it. Let's just say it in church because it's fun to say that kind of stuff in church, right? To stay in love, you have to make love. A verb. The foundation for long-term, in-love relationships is making love a verb. And the goal isn't to recapture a feeling, because in a relationship, the feeling is the caboose of the train. It's at the end. It's not the engine that drives everything. And I realize for a lot of us, it starts off as the engine because we met and we fell in love, and that feeling drew us together. It starts as the engine, but it's got to go quickly to the back of the relational train and become the caboose. And doing love, actually doing things that are loving, is the driving force behind a relationship that grows and stays in love. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that I want anybody else to know. Bless you too, sir. Bless you too. I've been doing that all week, man. I don't know. It's like crazy what's going on. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't want it to leave the room because listen, I don't want this to leave the room. The more you make love a verb, the more you'll make love. I'm just saying. But you didn't hear that from me, okay? You didn't hear that from me. But I want to help you, Jesus. I want to help you learn how to actively love one another, because love is something you do. It's a verb. It's not a place, not a feeling. It's not a noun. When two people who have at one point been in love or who are in love, when they actually love one another like this, it will rekindle the feeling of love. It will stoke the flames and the passion of love. So no matter if you're newlyweds, no matter if you're newly divorced, no matter if you've been married 30 years, listen, this is the way to maintain love and healthy emotional relationships. It's a command. We should love one another this way. And I'm not just talking about, this principle can be applied to every relationship in your life. We're going to focus in on those closest to you. But Jesus doesn't stop there. Don't just love one another. How are we supposed to do that, Jesus? A new command I give you, love one another. But how should I? As I have loved you. Not like they love you. Don't love them like they love you. Come on, you know that better than that. Don't love them if they deserve it. Don't love it if you feel the feeling. You love them just like I love you. Love them like that. Love them like that. Don't take your relational cues from the culture about how to love. I mean, it's not all bad, right? Culture isn't the best example. Don't take your relational cues from your parents, even if they were great, even if they were amazing. I mean, it's been rare that we've had a good example of a healthy marriage, but for most of us, even if our parents haven't divorced, are they really the best example? I mean, sure, they're together, but are they happy? If he would rather go on vacation with the dog, there's a problem. So instead of taking our relational cues from anything or anyone else, Jesus wants us to take it from him. from the one who loved us perfectly and shows us perfectly how to love one another. Take your cues from me, he says. That's what he's trying to tell his guys that day. Because when you do, Jesus will teach you how to love, not how to fall in love, because we got that part all figured out, but how to stay in love. He wants to help your love story be a long-term, live in the dream, kind of happily ever after story, if you make love a verb. Now, years later, the Apostle Paul comes along, and he took this very same idea that Jesus said that day to his disciples, to love one another, and he applies it in a different way, and it's a way that actually helps you and I understand what to do to love better. Okay, so love one another, what does that really mean? What does that look like? Paul had the same question, thought it over, the Holy Spirit helped him, and he writes it in a way, and he shares something with us that's going to help us know, how do I love one another? In what way did Jesus love me? In what way am I supposed to love the people around me? But he uses a bad word, a word that's not really popular anymore, and you might be offended as soon as you hear it, and I'm just going to warn you, this is not for, faint-hearted people, but he takes the same idea that Jesus said, and he uses a different word to help it stick a little bit more and give you a little bit more of a clear picture of how to do this. I'm going to start with the bad word. Just want you to be prepared. Are y'all ready for this? Okay, here it is. Submit to one another. And here's the Jesus part. Out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. You know what that means? It's the same as love one another, but it just has an action step associated with it. It shows you what love requires of you. It shows you how love will lead you, what love will lead you to do. It shows you what it looks like to love. And right after this, Paul takes this principle and he applies it to every relationship in your life. He'll talk about husbands and wives. He'll talk about parents and children. He'll talk about your work relationships, how we apply this principle. The foundation, the bottom line of love one another, the foundation, he calls it mutual submission. Mutual submission. We're going to look at this more in the coming weeks, but mutual submission, it simply means this, that I'm going to say to my spouse, in our relationship, you're the priority. And they're going to say to me, she's going to say to me, no, you're the priority. No, you're the priority. No, you're the priority. And the conflict, the big conflict in a relationship is who's going to be the first priority. I'm going to say it's you, and you're going to say it's me. And I don't know if you've ever seen that in a marriage, or if you've ever even seen that between a man and a woman or between people in love, but I want to tell you something. When you see it, it is powerful. We all want to be loved like that. And the people who we love want us to love them like that. It's a rare thing to see because it's scary, because somebody has to go first. Somebody has to make it about the other person before we make it about us. And that is not a human thing we do very well, is it? To put somebody else ahead of our own needs. When two people get that kind of love going on in their relationship, I'm telling you, love is alive and well, and it is strong. But it's so rare that very few of us here today and listening online have ever seen it. But when you see it, you're going to know that it's exactly what you've always wanted. And Paul is saying, that's what Jesus was saying. That's what loving one another looks like. It's when you give yourself up, when you submit out of love for God, and you make that person more important than yourself. You don't submit to them because they deserve it more. Come on, you all understand you marry somebody who doesn't always deserve you to be kind to them, right? They're not being kind to you. We don't submit to them because they deserve it or they've earned it. We do it even if we don't feel it because he loves us and we love like he loves. If we follow Jesus, then we are not our own anymore. We have to love the people around us in the same way that Jesus loved us. The God who sent his own son because he loves us and humbled himself. And you know who he put ahead of his own needs? Us. How are we to love one another in the world? Exactly like Jesus. Make it a verb. Show action. It requires something because you can't say the words without backing it up in the actions. When you love someone like this, you will submit yourself to them. You will put your needs back and their needs first. You will serve to meet their needs, and you will trust that they will love you enough to serve you to meet your needs. See, falling in love is easy, but staying in love, it's much, much harder. But if you're willing to make love a verb by putting the needs of your spouse before your own, then you're pouring what I'll call the foundation of this house that God wants to build in your marriage. Because you're not simply doing it to stay married, you're doing it to stay in love. Love one another. But what about when I don't feel like it, Jason? Well, that's okay, because you're not always going to feel it. You can still choose to love even if you don't feel it, because that's how Jesus loves you. Aren't you glad he doesn't love us based on how he feels and how good we are? Aren't you glad he loves you no matter what you've done, unconditionally? And his love for you isn't based on feelings, so with his help, you can love your spouse, you can love your kids, you can love your coworkers, you can love that neighbor who drives you nuts, you can love that person who you don't have anything in common with, because you're not loving them because they deserve it, you're loving them because he loves you like that. That's what we're talking about, growing in love, staying in love. I mean, love one another. Submit to one another. But what if they're not worth submitting to, Jason? I mean, what if I really want to, Well, that's okay. Because let's be honest, you're not always worth submitting to either, are you? And we don't submit to one another because they deserve it. No, we do it out of love, out of reverence for Jesus. Because that's the way he submitted himself for us. He died for our sins. He put our needs first. So in this series, I want to help us learn how to love one another like this. I want to help us learn what it looks like to submit to one another like this, because that word has been hijacked in our culture to mean something it never was intended to mean. And it's been used throughout history to dominate men dominating women. And I hate that. It needs to be reclaimed, and it's been hijacked, but we're going to take it back in this series. What does it look like to submit to one another out of love for Christ? I want to help you, because here's the question. What would change in your life if you made love a verb? What would change in your life if your spouse made love a verb? And listen, if you're here and you don't even follow Jesus, would you agree that loving each other the way Jesus has just taught us, the way that we're talking about today, it could change your life. It could change your marriage. I mean, what do you have to lose? Try it. Love one another. Submit to one another. It's the foundation for staying in love. Make it a verb. Make love a verb. It will help your life. It will help you get better at life, no matter what you believe about God. And when you do that, the thing that's so wonderful about meeting each other and falling in love with each other, not only can it be maintained, but it can grow and get even better. This is the way of love. This is what God always desired for us to experience. This is how we stay in love. And this is how Jesus loves you. And it's how he wants you to love one another. Let's stand together. Before I pray, I think the most powerful thing that we could do is to love one another like Jesus loves us. So I want to invite you in your relationships, whether it's your spouse or your kids or the people that you work with, or maybe who you're going to celebrate the Super Bowl with today. Ask yourself the question. We're going to talk more about this over the next couple weeks. What does love require of me? Ask it every day. Ask it throughout the day with your spouse, with your kids. Because I love you, Lord, and because I love them, and because I want our relationship to be a healthy one, what does love require of me? And we're going to examine that. We're going to look at that. Make love a verb in your life, and I guarantee you it's going to help things. So, Lord, thank you for, first and foremost, loving us the way that we're talking about today, that we don't deserve your love. We've done nothing to earn it. In fact, all of us here have done enough to warrant that you should never love us. I'm a sinner. I'm not deserving of your time or your love. And it, as a 40-year-old man who's been a follower of Jesus most of my life, it still blows me away that you love me. And I pray today somebody here would experience, maybe for the first time, maybe for the next time that they need it, the love of God. There's nothing you could ever do, nowhere, no far you could ever run, where God's love is not there with you. And he wants you to turn to him, to trust in him, and to believe that he is good and that he wants to change things. He can help you, but it's going to require you stopping, pausing, and admitting that you need his help. He loves you as a father loves his son, as a father loves his daughter. And he doesn't want anything to separate you. So if you're here today, I want to invite you to respond to faith by simply saying to Jesus, I believe. I need your help. If you're here and maybe you've prayed that at one point in your life, then I invite you to pray it again if that's where you're at. But if you're here and you've never prayed that, maybe today's the day where to fix what's going on in your life, in your marriage, with your family, maybe the thing that will change everything is you and God getting in the right place. It starts with faith and belief that Jesus is who he says he is, and he can do what he promises to do, to forgive you and to save you and to change your life. Help us, Lord, to love the people around us this way, whether we're church people or whether we're not. Help us to have the courage to make our life not about us, but about the people around us, to love them and to submit ourselves to them and to see what we could do to love them well. Help us to love them. I pray that you would save marriages in this room right now. Those who are watching online, they're hanging by a thread. By the power of God, through the selfless mutual submission that we are going to begin to live by, would you save marriages? Would you put broken pieces back together? When the feeling has been gone for years, would you build back up a foundation of love in that family, in that marriage? Would you save them, God? Would you show them that it's not too late, it's not too far gone? God, bring them back to a place together of selfless love. I pray that every parent in this room would love their kids that way, because that's how you love us. Help us to love others, Jesus, the way you love us. In your